Hey, everybody, this is Kelvin Red. I want to welcome you to Leadership Matters. Yes, it is a double entendre because leadership does matter and there are leadership matters that we have to deal with. Now, the purpose of this program is to tell the story of our guests each week. And what we want to do is to weave in and out lessons in leadership, steeped in servant leadership, but also self awareness. And so the reason I decided to start doing this program, this is something I've done a couple of times in the past. When I was working at the Pastoral Institute, we had a program called Servant Leadership Forum, and I would interview guests from around town, Columbus, Georgia, Phoenix City, Alabama. And I also hosted a television show at one point for the old cable TV of East Alabama. Now it's Beam. But here's what I really want to do. I have been very fortunate to travel around the country. And I have met some remarkable people in Alabama, Georgia, across this nation. And I'm seeing some people who are doing some remarkable things as leaders. People in other parts of the country, people in other parts of the state of Alabama and Georgia, people that others don't even know exist, but they are giants in their hometowns. And I want to expose these individuals to the rest of my community, my tribe. And with the advent of the internet, and social media, we can do that now. We can broadcast Leadership Matters around the world. And so I'm not talking about one-hit wonders. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who've had a sustained level of success. And that's what I want to do today. And so with our first guest today, the inaugural guest of Leadership Matters is Coach Joseph Eatmon, the head basketball coach at Shelton State Community College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I first met him a couple of years ago in one of my workshops, emergenetics workshop, and I was taken by him. I said, wow. I called my sister when I was coming home from Tuscaloosa. I said, I met somebody that kind of reminds me of our father. And so a little bit of background on Coach Eatmon. He's very successful. He's won 20 or more games each year as a head basketball coach. He's won 4 out of the last 5 Alabama Community College state basketball championships. He's been named Coach of the Year 4 consecutive years, and he's graduated 100% of his players, second-year players. And to me, that was the part that I thought, I've got to get him on. The rest of the country needs to know who this gentleman is. Coach Joseph Eatmon, welcome to Leadership Matters.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. That is quite a resume. And so I am going to say that you are who you are because of your upbringing. Now, you grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Tell us what it was like growing up, say, from up until about the age of 10. What was little Joseph Eatmon like?
Well, growing up, I was always in the gym. I was raised by my mother. Her and my dad divorced when I was 7 years old. So she brought the end of raising me along with a lot of my coaches, little league coaches growing up. I started playing basketball when I was at the age of 3. We didn't have a lot, so I spent a whole lot of time at the Benjamin Barnes YMCA with, they say, the village looking out for me because, I was pretty much there from sun up to sundown. So, it was a lot of gym time, a lot of time in West Tuscaloosa, a lot of times at Barnes Branch YMCA growing up.
Okay. Well, so now your high school years, when you were a teenager, where did you attend high school in Tuscaloosa?
Well, my 9th grade year, I went to middle school in public school with Tuscaloosa City Schools. My 9th grade year, I did a year at Tuscaloosa Academy.
My now 9th grade year, right there, because for the folks who don't know, Central Tuscaloosa, which is my old high school's namesake, Central Tuscaloosa, it was a public school in town. Mm-hmm. But when you were at Tuscaloosa Academy, you told me that there were only like 4 Black students in the entire school. So what was that like for you transitioning from where you came from into that environment, and what did you learn from it?
Well, it was a big adjustment for me because, like I said, I grew up in West Tuscaloosa, and I can remember, pretty much my entire K through 5 career. We probably had 1 or 2 students, 1 or 2 white students in my school the whole time, kindergarten through 5th grade. So, when I was coming up, going to middle school, we did have black and white students. So when I went to TA, it was a big culture shock. It was a culture shock academically because, I felt like I was really, really smart. I made all A's and B's, and then I kind of went over there and realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, because it was more of a college preparatory school. So I had to work a lot harder academically. And it was a big culture shock as well. I had to make some adjustments, but that was one thing that I could say, that I handled pretty well. There were some things that I liked about it. There were some things I didn't like
But
about it.
what did you learn from that experience? Because I had a very similar experience. What did you learn from that experience?
Well,
Going from one culture to another.
I learned that the world was more than just my little box that I lived in. I learned that there were other cultures, and I learned how to adapt to other cultures. At the time when I was going over there, it was when Mercedes was first coming to Tuscaloosa as well. So not only, there were a lot of German students coming in as well. So,
Okay.
it was a big culture shock for me, but I adjusted well, and I met a lot of lifelong friends that I still communicate with today.
So when you're a teenager and you look into the future, like for instance, when I was growing up and I was a teenager, or when somebody asked the question like, did you achieve your childhood dreams? And I would say no, because if I had, I'd be a retired NBA basketball player right now. What were your dreams like as a teenager? When you're 14, 15, 16 years old and you looked out into the future, where did you see yourself? What did you think you'd be doing?
Well, I was a little bit different because I was a pretty good player. I was a McDonald All-American in high school. I averaged 20
Wait a
points.
minute, you didn't tell me that.
Yeah, well, I was a McDonald All-American nominee in high school. I was my senior year. My junior and senior year both, I averaged 20 points a game or more. So I feel like I was a pretty good basketball player, but playing professionally was never really my goal. A lot of people ask me, why I didn't move on and play overseas and do things, but growing up early, I knew I wanted to be a coach. I knew I wanted to be a basketball coach when I was 5 or 6 years old. And I say that because, growing up, a lot of my coaches were my role model. I had some strong men in my life that were my little league coaches, were my middle school coaches, were my high school coaches, were my mentor. So, growing up, that was always my goal. I kind of wanted to be like them. I kind of wanted to coach basketball and have an impact on lives like those men had on my life coming up.
Nice. Well, in case you're just joining us on Leadership Matters, our first ever program, our guest tonight is Coach Joseph Eatmon, the head basketball coach at Shelton State Community College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He's a hot commodity right now, and I'm telling you, if you haven't heard of him, I'm telling you right now, he's a young guy. Don't let that gray beard fool you. He's a young guy. He's a kid in the profession, and he's extremely successful. So you can join us here on my personal Facebook page, on my business page, and on my YouTube channel. Take us on the journey from the time you left high school to the time you graduated college into your first job.
My life, I'll say I've been humbled more than anybody I know. When I graduated, when I first graduated from the University of West Alabama, I went on and I took a in-school suspension job right there, right across the street at Livingston High School. Then at the same time, a guy by the name of Edward McCarter was getting a head coaching job at the University of West Alabama. And he told me, I had an opportunity to either be a intern with the athletic director or intern with him. And he said, man, you don't want to be an athletic director. You want to coach basketball. So why don't you come be my grad assistant? So I stayed there with him for a year, and I was his grad assistant for a year. And then I moved on, and that's when I took, after a year as a grad assistant, I ended up getting married, having a child, my first child. So I needed to go make some real money. $600 a month as a GA wasn't really enough to provide for a family. So I kind of went on and I took an in-school suspension job at Livingston High School. After that year, I ended up taking the head coaching job at Linden High School, the smallest 1A high school in the state of Alabama. That's kind of what they're known for, the smallest 1A school in the state. After 1 year there and winning a regular season, won a area championship, I was let go. And it's kind of funny how things work in life, because that same night I was at the board meeting and the board had voted to not renew my contract.
After
So,
you won the area championship.
yeah, regular season. We lost in the area tournament, but we were regular season. We hosted the area tournament and lost in the area tournament. Coach McCarter just so happened to be coming through Linden that night, coming back from recruiting. His assistant had just called him the night before and said that he was taking another job and he needed an assistant coach. And he recognized something in me from that 1 year being his grad assistant. So he hired me as a full-time assistant there at West Alabama. So
Wow.
did 2 years there as an assistant coach. After 2 years, he was let go. And I actually received a contract for another year, but decided not to take advantage of it. I decided I ended up getting the head coaching job at Alabama Southern Community College for a year. Ended up winning 20 games there, tied for the regular season championship there, and again was called in, and my contract was not renewed.
Whoa!
So I had some really, really bad luck early, and I know in my heart this is what God called me to do, because trust me, after those experiences, I never wanted to coach. Even though I knew I always wanted to coach basketball, I just thought coaching basketball wasn't for me.
Well, I was about to say that, to me, that's a God thing for your coach, your former coach, just to be driving through town and you all connect and one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
Well,
so after my year there, that's when it all began here at Shelton. I sat at home, didn't know what was next, had 2 children. Coach Mohan called me and said his assistant was deciding to get out of coaching altogether. He didn't want to coach anymore and really needed an assistant. And I had already accepted a elementary school PE job. Actually I was moving to Tuscaloosa anyway. Wasn't planning on coaching, just wanted to be a regular PE teacher. And he calls me and he say, "Hey, I got an assistant coaching job here." And the fire kind of relit in my eye, and decided, hey, well, maybe I'll give it one more shot. And I ended up being his assistant for 4 years. Won one championship as his assistant. Made it to the national tournament twice as his assistant in 4 years. And after he retired, after 4 years as assistant, I became the head coach here.
Well, let's talk about that now. You're the head coach at Shelton State. You've been there now. What is this? You just completed your 5th year, or you're going into your
just completed year 5.
Season 5. Now, and you've won 4 out of the last 5 state championships. Mm-hmm. What is your secret sauce? I mean, you've won 4 out of the last 5, and you're graduating players, which I'm sure the moms out there are really loving that when you come to recruit their sons. So what is your secret sauce?
Why not say as a coach, why not say you got to have good players? Good players make good coaches. And 2, you got to give them the discipline and accountability they need to be successful, not only on the court, but off the court. We hold our guys accountable on a daily basis, whether it be in the community, whether it be in the classroom, whether it be on the court. We like to prepare them for life. And when you realize, one thing I realized when I went through all that early in my career was, it's not about me.
Right.
It's about providing the opportunity for these young men, just like people did for me, to be able to further their education, to be able to provide for their family when they graduate from school. I tell them all the time, eventually the ball's going to go flat. When the ball stops bouncing, what do you have? What did you get out of it?
So with that being said, do you consider yourself a teacher?
I do. I majored in education. I got my master's in education. I was raised by an educator. My mom was an educator for over 32 years. So I feel like that we're teaching the game of basketball. We're teaching the game of life. And every day we come in the gym in hopes to learn something. In order to be a teacher, you've got to be a learner as well. So that's another thing I like to say about myself. I'm constantly learning, constantly getting better at my craft so that I can teach these guys how to be, better men.
Before we get into the heart of your leadership philosophy, I want to talk about, and this is something I'm going to talk with every guest that I interview on Leadership Matters. The last 2 years, were totally different than anybody in athletics, the business world, education, what have you, could have ever imagined when we have the COVID situation we have in the world, not just in the country, nearing 600 deaths. When it first hit, we didn't know what was going on. What was it like for you, the leader of a program of young men, trying to make sense of everything?
Well, you know, when it first hit, we had just won the region championship, and we were 2 days from loading the bus headed to Hutchinson, Kansas. You know, the first thing I did is went out and bought up all the Lysol I could to get ready to make that trip to Kansas. And 2 days before we were supposed to go, we got a call that they had canceled the tournament.
Right.
You know? And even after they had canceled the NCAA tournament, I still had hope that, hey, you know, we're junior college guys, so we're going to make it happen. But they ended up canceling it. And the first thing my mind went to is, you know, what about these guys? You know, not what about us, you know, because like I told my coaches when we met that day, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to go play in the national tournament. You know, some of these guys, as coaches, yeah. Mm-hmm. But some of these guys, this was their one opportunity to go to the national tournament and play in front of 300-400 coaches. So my attention immediately turned towards, you know, how can we help them? How can we help them further their education? How can we help them connect with other coaches moving forward? And we were fortunate in that. We had every guy on that team moved on to play somewhere else at the next level and get their education paid for. But that was my main focus was, you know, what about these guys?
How difficult of a challenge was it to keep them together?
It was tough. You know, we got real familiar with Zoom. You know, that was an older team. You know, we had a lot of sophomores moving on that team. So it was constantly every day FaceTiming, Zooming as a team, you know, checking in on them, just making sure they were okay. You know, there was a lot going on, a lot of emotions going on. I think they were scared. They were nervous about what was next. So we really had to dig in and make sure that they were okay, not only as players, but as people.
And that's a fantastic way of looking at it. You know, when we first met, and yeah, this is a product placement. We first met in the Mergenetics workshop that I was presenting at your institution at Shelton State, and I noticed right away. I said, you know, he's got that it factor, and to me, it's quite obvious that you are on that journey towards self-awareness. And we define self-awareness not only is how you look at how you see yourself, but how other people see you. And you being the head basketball coach in a town where you grew up, you're probably one of the, I mean, outside of Nick Saban, you're probably one of the most recognizable people in your community. So what does that mean to you from a self-awareness standpoint to understand that, hey, somebody's always watching me?
You know, two things. One, I'd always say, you know, when I began the journey of self-awareness, one is when I realized that this is what I'm called to do. I'm doing what I've been called to do. And then two, I realized that, hey, it's not about me. A lot of people hinder themselves in reaching that special place by making it about them. Every day I wake up, you know, nothing I do is about me. You know, the championships, hey, that's about the young men that work hard for those. You know, the things we do in the community, you know, we're gonna consistently do on a daily basis because that's what it's all about. You know, I'm here to serve. I'm here to make life better for other people, and you know, it just so happened that I get to do, you know, what I love in the city that I love.
Yeah,
you know, I love the city of Tuscaloosa. It's given so much to me. And I get a chance to coach the game of basketball. Two things that have given a lot to me in my life is the city of Tuscaloosa and basketball. Mm-hmm. You know, probably saved my life. I know that's a cliche for a lot of people to say, but basketball probably, you know, growing up where I grew up and seeing the things that I saw, basketball really did save my life.
So now part of that self-awareness is having a vision not only for yourself, but for your program. And you talk glowingly about the young men that you've been entrusted to serve as their head coach. And I follow you on social media, and you've got players all across this country, and you're tweeting at them, telling them good job. And I see it on Instagram, and it seems like you're right. If I didn't know better, I would think you were their high school coach and you raised them from like 6th or 7th grade all the way to the time they graduated from high school. So with that being said, what's the vision that you have for your basketball program?
Well, one, when I took over here, academics was at an all-time low, to be honest. We had went 4 or 5 years where not very many men's basketball players graduated. So that was the first thing on my mind. Hey, let's flip the script with that. Let's get these young men to understand that, it's not just about basketball. It's about getting out of basketball what you can get. Because, to be honest, we're getting a lot out of these young men. We're winning championships. We're hanging banners. What are they getting out of it? And that was my question to myself and my staff, the people I surrounded myself by, is the fact that we've got to make sure these young men are graduating. I tell them all the time, even in the huddle, don't let academics dictate where you can go. Let your talents dictate where you go.
That's a tweetable moment there. Don't let academics dictate where you can go. That's some heady stuff right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got a lot of talented guys, always have. And we've been fortunate to be able to make sure that, everybody's not a Division I talent. But one thing I can say is most of my guys that were Division I talent had an opportunity to play Division I basketball because they did what they had to do academically. We got them graduated and got them where they needed to be.
Well, you talked about the people that you surround yourself with. How important is it to have like good assistant coaches, people that you can trust, people that got your back, that they're there with you thick and thin?
I always say not just coaching basketball, but in leadership, period. The best leaders know who to hire. Know who to hire in what positions, and give them the tools they need to work and allow them to work. I'm fortunate here. I talked about Coach McCarter earlier, who gave me my first job in coaching, who's got over 30, been coaching longer than I've been living. Now he's my assistant coach, along with one of my former point guards who won me my first championship. He's one of my assistant coaches. So, along with 2 other volunteer assistants that this year that I had that were really, really good, and really, really helped us win the three-peat, finish the three-peat. So, who you surround yourself by is huge. When I go speak to kids, one thing I tell them is tap in. I say, the T is for time. What are you doing with your time? And the A is for association. Who are you associating yourself with? Who you associate with yourself with can hold you back or can prepare you where you want to go. And then I tell them to prepare. So, I tell them all the time to tap in, but that A and tap is essential.
Well, it looks like you do a very good job of building a team. So I would imagine, like, for instance, I do a lot of team building workshops. I've been very fortunate to travel around and meet with a lot of people in your position, real leaders. And teamwork seems like it's paramount to CEOs and deans and administrators, presidents. I would imagine you could, in this day and age of college athletics, with the transfer portal, you could probably teach Division I coaches how to put a team together now, because they're coming and they're leaving, they're gone. What's your secret sauce to putting together a very good to great team?
Well, one, I'd say relationships. I think that's the biggest thing in recruiting and putting together a team, is building relationships with the guys you're recruiting, building relationships with the high school coaches, building relationships with the AAU coaches. To me, relationships are everything. Even with the players, I even think a lot of Division I guys, I think the retention rate would go down. I think more players would hang around if they just took time to build relationships with them and get to know them, not as just basketball players, but as people, and let them know they care. You mentioned all the tweets that I send out and Facebook messages about my former players. I think, to me, that's huge. If a kid comes and plays for me for 1 year, if I spend 365 days around you and I don't have some kind of impact on your life, or if I spend 365 days around you and you can't pick up the phone and call me for advice, I feel like I failed.
Wow.
As a coach, as a person. I see it all the time. Kids spend 4 years at 4-year institutions and never come back, never give back, never reach back out to the coach. To me, that's offensive. Like I'd be offended if one of my guys moved on and we didn't have some sort of communication after they left.
So tell me that now. A part of that, and we've got about 5 minutes left. A part of that caring is discipline. And you were telling me the story before we went on. How many games in a row did you win this year? You won 22, 23, something like that?
We were at when we lost, I think we were at we had just we won 3 in the terms of 21. We had just won 20.
Okay,
we had a chance to finish the season undefeated, and we lost the last regular season game.
But there was one of those games in there when you said you were trailing by 20 points. No, how many points? 20 points.
We were trailing by 20 at halftime.
But you won by 12. But my question was, being an old school guy, what was it like in the locker room at halftime?
Well, it was rough. I get a little rough in the locker room when I'm losing, but we're always thinking about what adjustments we can make, and sometimes the adjustment is, certain guys that's not being productive, sometimes they've got to sit, and in that particular game, we had 2 Division I signees who had done absolutely nothing in the first half but walk around. And I think, when we took them out of the game, that's kind of when the game shifted. And I think as a coach, they always say the bench is the best teacher, but also, you learn life lessons from it. If you don't show up to work, you don't do your job, the guy behind you shows up and does the job, they get your job, and that's kind of what we're teaching. We're teaching not just basketball, but we're teaching just life, and I think after that one game, I think I got a lot more production out of those 2 guys because their eyes open like, hey, coach, he can win without me, with or without me. I think Nick Saban said it best when he said, it's 2 forms of discipline. You got to decide which ones you want. It's 2 types of pain, he said. It's the pain of discipline or the pain of disappointment. You got to decide which one you want. So we like to get the pain of discipline because we don't like the pain of disappointment. We don't like to lose.
Love it. Love it. Well, the last couple of questions I want to ask you in rapid fire motion, because we got about 3 minutes. What are your strengths? If you could say, what are 2 or 3 of your strengths? Like, what is Joseph Eatmon's superpower?
Well, I'm gonna shout out the Emergenetics workshop right here because I think that really did help me kind of learn, what my strengths and weaknesses are. I'll start out with my weaknesses. I'm not a very organized guy, but I'm very socially aware. Relationship wise, I think relationships are my strength. I think being able to build and maintain relationships. A lot of times people build relationships but don't maintain them, and I think that's kind of when they get left behind. But I really think a lot of my success is based on me just being a caring person and being able to build and maintain relationships.
Well, the season is over. It's the summertime. What do the next couple of months look like for you before you get the fellas back in and you start your workouts and start preparing to make another run for a championship?
Well, actually, the guys moved back in May 26th, so we're already back.
Okay.
So we've actually got a showcase in Montgomery.
Montgomery, you sure do. I'm sorry.
Coming up on the 25th and 26th. That's going to be really, really good. We've got pretty much 25 of the top junior colleges in the country. We got them from, I think, six or 7 different states coming out of Montgomery to battle it out next Friday and Saturday. So Coach, we're working. We're always working.
Let me ask you one final question on that point. What is it like being the hunted? Like when you're on the mountaintop, what's it like knowing that, okay, we're going on the road Friday night, Saturday night, we got to bring our A game or we're going to get bounced out of here. The other team may not know it, but you as a coach saying we got to bring our A game.
Well, I always say I'd rather be at the top, at the mountaintop than in the valley. So I never say it's a bad position to be in, but I will say it's a tough position because, a person like me that's been that's been through the things I've been through, I'll never lose my focus. There's no such thing as me losing my focus because I know where I come from and I know I don't want to go back. Now, my players, it's a different story. They don't know. A lot of times having guys for 1 or 2 years, they don't understand the history of the program. They don't understand the fact that, people are going to play a little bit harder against you, not because of who you are, but because of where the program is.
Yes.
And that's something we have to preach on a daily basis. And I always say, other than last year, even last year, I think that kind of caught up with us that last regular season game of the season when we were 21-0, and we lost. We dropped the last one. I think that was a big key in it. Is guys lost focus. And, start, as they say, as my mom would say growing up, start smelling themselves a little bit, feeling like they're a little bit better than what they actually are. But, you got to stay focused. You got to keep first things first. You got to know what your goals are, and you got to spend every day and every second working towards what you say your goals are.
Wow. I have learned so much. I have enjoyed having you on this program, the first one, Leadership Matters. I knew when I met you, I immediately I called some people and said, I met somebody today. This guy is an up and comer. If you don't know who Joseph Eatmon is now, I'm telling you, in about 5 years, you're going to look up and you're going to see where he's won 10 Alabama state championships. I got to be careful because I got clients who are also community colleges in the state of Alabama. But I see great things for you no matter where you go. I see great things. And I appreciate you joining us here on Leadership Matters.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, Kevin.
All righty. Thanks to Coach Joseph Eatmon, the head basketball coach at Shelton State Community College. I would like for you to be aware that our next program is going to be 2 weeks from today, but it's going to be in the morning time. And our next guest is going to be Don Avery, President and CEO of Fairview Park Hospital in Dublin, Georgia. Don, I've known him for years. He's my oldest client, and love him to death. The guy is a great leader, and that's what I want on this program. I want to introduce you to some of the greatest folks that I have met from a leadership standpoint in their respective communities. This is Kelvin Redd. I'm signing off now from Leadership Matters, and as I like to say, remember, define your destiny.